Shot an hour-and-a-half video completely. Yep, I shot an hour-and-a-half long video. Completely out of frame. Bear with me. Man, deep diving. It's too cold to go outside, so I just like sit on the internet googling crap. You ever hear of a shoebill? Fucking dinosaur of a bird, literally. But they're not really, they're just kind of scary, but they're not dangerous, I don't believe. But they could be, I bet. 5-foot tall bird, mostly found in Africa. They eats like little crocodiles and snakes and fish. Just look at this thing. It just looks menacing. The shoebill. It's like a rock hard, razor sharp bill. Second biggest in the bird kingdom. That thing's nuts. It's freaking huge too. Definitely see the dinosaur like aspect to it. It's definitely prehistoric looking. They're known to stand like a statue and just wait for the right opportunity to strike. So weird. Some videos. It used to be classified as a stork. I believe they changed that. Jesus. It's big.
He's by far my favorite bird and my favorite animal. Is the shoebill.
Look how big. His head's bigger than that guy's head.
I love this girl so much, and even for her tattoos on my leg.
Until it pecks your face off. Just tries to swallow you whole.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's probably not going to end too good. I don't want to see anything getting eaten, but there's not that many of them left. Ooh. Okay, I guess we're out of shoebill. Yeah. Crazy. Never heard of her or nothing until today. Skull. Supposedly it's like razor sharp too. It can just like cut things right in half. But man, like 2 days ago researched John Brown. I never even really heard of it till I saw a video about it and I'm like, what? It was so crazy. It was so, the whole thing's nuts. Crazy John Brown. Like, I don't think he was really crazy though. A lot of people thought he was. He was a guy from the East, big time abolitionist. Back in the days of bloody Kansas, Kansas was not a state. Hero or terrorist? There's a fine line, sometimes a very fine line between the two. Mr. Beast. But so this guy actually has a farm in my state, albeit 6 hours or better, 6 hours away, but it's my state here, New York. He's up in Adirondacks by Lake Placid, and he was a big part of the Underground Railroad. It's an easy crossing point right there into Canada. You can't. I'm right on the border, but I've got the Niagara River and Lake Erie the whole way. It's a very, very good natural defense, natural barrier. You really can barely cross that thing. But up in Canada, I believe you just walk across a bunch of places in the Thousand Islands area. Real pretty. Such a beautiful area. I took a couple vacations out there. It's so nice. John friggin' Brown. I had no idea. I know a lot of people that look just like that guy. He had 12 kids, so it's possible that there's a lot of descent. What's Wiki? American abolitionist. A lot of images of him. It's pretty amazing how many pictures there are of this guy, which is kind of interesting. Crazy beard. Yeah, he had like 12 kids. Took a handful of them to Kansas, raised a little hell up there with the pro-slavery people. Kansas, for a while there, was not a state. It was considered territory. And both pro and anti-slavery people were flooding there like crazy. And a whole bunch of civil unrest ensued, with the worst being the pro-slavers basically burned and killed everybody in this one whole town up there. So this guy rabbles up a couple of his kids, a bunch of other people, and he manages to befriend some really rich people, very, very wealthy people who are backing this dude. So he has the best of it. He's got the Sharps rifle, which is like the assault rifle of the day. It's brand new. They never really show him with a gun. You may have heard of, what are they called? Beecher's Bibles, where this pastor of a church takes up a huge collection, throws in a bunch of his own money, and sends a whole bunch of guns created up to Kansas for this guy to use. And so they wouldn't get messed with. They labeled them Bibles and books. Naturally, nobody wanted any part of it. So the guns made it, giving these 20 people the ability to take on hundreds. They end up murdering a few people, kind of cold-blooded. Some pro-slavers. He was very blunt, very staunch. He would simply ask people, are you pro-slavery or against? And go as far as just murdering people, but he killed a bunch of people up there and then went home. And on his way home, which is probably a pretty long ride from Kansas to the Adirondacks, you know what I mean? It's no easy journey. Even today, I wouldn't even want to drive that. These dudes did it on a horseback. Could you imagine? I wonder how long that would have took. A month? I don't know. I also want to find out, how long would it take to ride horseback from the Adirondacks to Kansas? Good Lord. John Brown ain't in this, is he? What is he supposed to be? That's a famous painting. I don't know. Spirit of 76. Painting. Let's wiki that thing. AKA Yankee Doodle. Abbott Hall in Marblehead, Massachusetts. I believe I've seen that place. I was in the back of it, looking at the cemetery in the back. This is father. Okay. Hugh Mosier. I don't know. The boy was Henry DeVoe. Okay. His father was the drummer. Interesting. I didn't know about it, but I don't know why. Rabbit hole and Stu concocts a raid on Harper's Ferry Arsenal in Virginia. He was born in Connecticut. He was also destroyed by fire. But he ended up in New York State. No idea how he did that. He was all over. John Brown's tannery. He was in Pennsylvania. This guy got around for back in the day. This poor lady, 12 kids. No wonder she's not smiling. You know, those girls are like scared to death. You don't ever see any pictures of his whole family in here. It's like the most famous picture of him. Daguerreotype, taken by African-American photographer Augustus Washington. Monrovia, Liberia, died at age 55. I wonder what happened. Moved to Liberia. Leave his home in Hartford, Connecticut to immigrate to West Africa. It took him a year to raise the money. 2 small children and his wife to join thousands of other African Americans in leaving the United States to start a free black nation. Can't blame him. Why he died. Yeah, I know a few people that look just like this dude. Age 59. We got hung. Him and a bunch of people. Bleeding Kansas. Yeah, I've always heard of it. I never really knew what they meant by the bloody bleeding Kansas. And the whole thing was like a slavery issue. Both sides were pretty passionate about the cause and were willing to die for it. After his little exploits in bloody Kansas, and he goes back home and comes up with this idea to lead a raid on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry, which is in Virginia. And that thing changed hands. I think they saw 11 times during the Civil War. This is just before that. It was about a few years before the Civil War. Grabs up a bunch of his kids, a bunch of supporters, a couple black slaves, free slaves, and they go up there to rob all the guns and start an uprising. They're going to rob Harper's Ferry. They almost were successful. They're going to arm all the slaves to start a revolt. They made a big mistake. So they cut down all the phone lines and everything so that this town can't call for help. But they let this train go by, and the train alerts everybody, and before you know it, the whole fucking countries are shooting at them. They're held up in this like firehouse. Peter Henson Baldwin, Norwegian artist. He looks a little bit older than, I mean, he died at 59. So he wasn't even 60, but he looks like he's 70 in this picture. Yeah, he raised hell in Kansas, killed some people, butchered them basically. And then his next chess move, Harper's Ferry, the Potawatomi Massacre. Yeah, I think that's where he went in and killed a bunch of people. Boy, he just looks so familiar. He almost looks a little bit like Lincoln there. Moving relentlessly. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York. A long story. It's short. I mean, he's friends with tons of people. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, but none of them want no part of this raid. They're probably smart in doing so. Nor did any of the slaves in the area. I mean, they're probably all scared to death. John Brown's Fort. That's just the fire department building that they all held up in at the end. He survives. His kids get killed and took into this Winchester Medical College in the area of Virginia right there. The Union soldiers end up burning that thing right to the ground. So while they're there, they find this guy's dead son that was used like a toy and cut up into pieces and turned into lit furniture and book bags and everything else. They found a black child that got tortured to death at the college also. Ended up burning the thing. The Union soldiers burned it right to the ground. It never gets rebuilt. Winchester Medical. Burning of Winchester Medical College. Yeah, there's shit for pictures of it too. Yeah, pretty prestigious, but they screwed up. They were treating people's bodies. They were known to be grave robbers. They were like the original body snatchers. Black people were nightmarishly afraid of them. These were people who were known to body snatch and do terrible things to the bodies. I don't know much about the hanging. So, what Union soldiers found at the college. Nathaniel Banks. I don't know. I think he might have been from New York. Maybe not. No. This is too wrong. Personal details. It's too okay. Shenandoah. I don't want to dig into this too deeply, but pretty interesting. Banks in 1852. All these dudes went to West Point together. Why was it burned? It's in retaliation for the desecration of cadavers from the Brown raid. More specifically, retaliation for the desecration, they discovered one of the cadavers, the body of one of John Brown's sons, identified as Watson. Fighting against slavery and the raids on Harper's Ferry had been dishonored, made into an anatomical specimen with the label, "Thus always with abolitionists." It's actually the motto, always to the tyrants or something, motto, Commonwealth of Virginia. Collected, dissected the bodies of 3 men of John Brown's troop, tortured and killed 3 other people for favoring the Union. Secessionist stronghold. It's crazy. Very heated. People were not killing each other, beating each other half to death in the Houses of Parliament and stuff, or in the Congress. It's a Parliament, that's like those countries. I think. Confederate soldiers died in that area. It's crazy. The medical school in Winchester was the first in the state. The Medical College of the Valley of Virginia was incorporated December 30th, 1825 by the Virginia General Assembly, operated from 1826 to 1829. Its location is not known. It's not the same location as the modern suggests. I guess a small break-off, back in the McGuire home. Positions. Hugh Holmes McGuire. 20 years later, McGuire restarted medical school at Winchester Medical College. Most of the bodies used in dissection were black. The owner of a slave could do with his corpse whatever he wanted, donating it to a medical college. It's easier than digging a grave. The majority of cadavers were African American. Not because they're targeted, they're just more vulnerable to grave robbing, easier to steal. That's why the college is both feared and hated by the blacks in the area, of course. So the John Brown raid, he goes to Harper's Ferry Federal Arsenal to fucking steal all the guns. Consequently, while they're there, he sends up a few spies before they go. They settle in, become friends with George Washington estate. George Washington's long dead at this point, but his estate's still there. He's got all these guns, huge arsenal of weapons, and they actually somehow get him. These guys end up with those weapons. What else? Yeah, they ended up blowing it. They were close. They almost pulled it off, but they didn't get no support from the area locals that they thought they were gonna. I.e. the slaves. But no. North Elba, New York, look how pretty. Jeez Louise. 2020 census, 7,500 people. John Brown's body sent back to his wife, but they were never sure if it was really him even. I don't know how that. I was given Miss Brown. She took it back and buried it. Two blacks and two whites. Intern tomorrow on the spot the gal stood. I don't know what that means. They didn't want to give the bodies back to the families. Actually, they had to hide the bodies. In 1928, that's a considerable time later, a barn was raised. A wealthy farmer, fruit grower, 58 Western Winchester. While excavations building a new house, a cemetery was found. There were bodies, not skeletons, but tons of loose bones. Enough to assemble several skeletons. Generally accepted the bones were that of those bodies dissected years ago. The black boy tortured. On Sunday, March 15, 1862. Considerable excitement was caused by the discovery of the remains of a black boy about 7 years of age in the dissection room of the college. Head removed, feet cut off, body mutilated. The college had not been occupied for that long, and it was evident the boy had not been dead for more than a week, so I figured he was tortured. Another reports the boy was 14 and was shot because he was jubilant to think the Union troops were so close. A rebel soldier seeing this shot him dead on the spot. The body was given to the college. No anatomical study would explain the removal of his head, nor does it explain why his arms cut off at the elbows, his legs at the knees, and his belly ripped open lengthwise. This is not the work of a doctor or a medical student. The best interpretation, just a court display for the arriving Union doctors and soldiers to see. All sorts of people, especially the blacks. The skinning of one of his brown sons. Yeah, long story short, they skinned him. It was like everybody in town's got a piece of this dude's kid's skin, using it for all kinds of shit, sewing it in the pouches. They made moccasins. Somebody actually had a pair. A man present before the arrival of the troops actually had a pair of these moccasins, gave him scrap skin. Distributed widely in the area. Pieces have been kept minute because there's such a demand. Tiny little pieces. The skinning of a human corpse was disrespect. Nat Turner's body was skinned. That's probably why the slaves were so afraid. 1831, Nat Turner. The rebels killed between 55 and 65 white people. I don't know anything about this. Oh, shit. Look at this. I'm sure the mob retaliation was terrible. Commonwealth executed 56 enslaved people accused of participating. Union officers coming into Winchester had no reason to know about this. Union troops needing space for barracks and hospitals used all the buildings and commandeered into their services. They soon found a vacant medical college. In the medical college, preserved the body of John Brown's son, killed at Harper's Ferry, first skinned. Only the frame of the muscle was retained. Stand at full length in the corner of the museum, labeled John Brown's son, always the abolitionists. The muscles, veins, and arteries were all preserved. Top of the cranium sawed off, and the lips proposed distortedly in disrespect. According to the doctor, Jarvis is the most beautiful specimen he ever saw. Anatomical preparation was perfect. The arteries stained with red dye, and the muscles looked as solid as wood. When found, it was leaning against the wall, arms extending upwards from the elbows, with 4 fingers missing. All the toes had been stolen by souvenir hunters. This detailed account was sworn in by Dr. Jarvis Johnson, who General Banks, when Union troops first doctored into the building. During the city, it took possession of the medical college situated therein. In the museum, I found the logs of electrical anatomical human body or frame, observed contents, muscles, arteries, and nerves. In the hospital, records are removal of number prominent city chests are called on the hospital, each declared as the remains of the sons of John Brown. Professor strongly appealed to me in the name of my profession and the interests of the same to return him to the college, which had been burned, which would be rebuilt, but never was. Whatever happened to it? Probably on the farm. Afterwards, in the summer 1862, he shipped a body to Franklin, Indiana. Here's expressed to my office. Winchester Medical School was burned to the ground by Union soldiers under General Banks just before retreating as Stonewall Jackson's army came down to Shenandoah. It was put forth by his student, Winchester, Virginia, September 7th, 1894. This relayed on. This was the oldest of the graduate of the Winchester College. The college was burned by General Banks' army in 1862. So regretted this, but they applied the torch with their own hands. They burned the college because of what had been done to Jeff Watson Brown's body. To a much lesser extent, the Black Boy also. According to Richmond Whig, it was openly avowed this was done because it was concerning the body of one of the John Brown's sons, and then Brown was the Union's greatest hero, the icon of the fight against slavery. As Frederick Douglass put it, he was willing to live and die for the slave. He asked Frederick Douglass to come with him, and he didn't. He was afraid. I can't blame him. He made the right choice, apparently. John Brown's widow lived in California. She traveled considerably. She'd not been home in 20 years. I've been there, Quit Bay. I was right there. I didn't know that. I probably saw it and didn't realize it. But, so I was there. I saw all the stuff in that area. Body snatchers. John Brown's Raiders. Fugitive slaves. Dangerfield F. Newby, the oldest of John Brown's Raiders. He died in the raid. Owen Brown. I fucking think he lived. I was born Anderson, the only survivor, black survivor, became a human soldier. Interesting. Ontario. Ontario's a hot spot for the Underground Railroad. They were all going there. During the raid, Lewis Washington, great-grandnephew of George Washington, was taken hostage by the raiders. Surrendered the sword of Frederick the Great and the pistols presented by General Lafayette. John Brown later brandished the sword. I wonder what happened to it. Yeah, that's all he got. I didn't know that's all he did. It got Washington's stuff. Lewis Washington. Died at 58. Gray sword. Pistols. Largest in the world. The library is the largest in the world. 20 million catalog. What? No wonder fucking taxes are out of control. New York State Museum, New York State Archives, Cultural Education Center, Empire State Plaza. Albany. Holy shit. I've never seen that. This isn't my state. This is our state capital I know nothing about. Nobody around here does. It's too far away. That is an impressive little place. $2 billion price tag. Research library. That thing's been around. It's opened to the public in 1855. Oh, not a fire. A lot of history. The first Braille library. Just give me a headache. John Brown's give me a headache. That's all crazy. John Brown's Raiders. What else do you read? Five of them escaped. I don't know how the fuck they pulled that off. Just like his dad. I don't know how many kids they had. Owen Brown, after a very difficult trip, made it safely of his brother Jason's house in Ohio. For many years he raised grapes on the island of Lake Erie. He died in 1889, Pasadena, California. This guy made it to Canada, died in the Union Army in 1861. Robert E. Lee's statement that local black people gave Brown no voluntary assistance at all is not correct. It appeared in many Southern reports on the radio, blah, blah, blah. These dudes were all carrying the Sharps rifle, the assault weapon of the day. So while everybody else is loading like a musket down the barrel, this is one of the first breech loading. I stick the bullet stuff in the back of the gun, not the front. We had problems, it wasn't perfect. Some interesting designs. Falling block rifle. Falling block has its own look at you. Simple design. Simple as it gets. But that thing wasn't closing up tight. Yeah, that was the gun that, you know, made 10 of them is equal as 1,000 guys. It's an interesting gun. The paper cartridge, you know, you'd like a musket, you'd have the ball, the powder. Unit cost $30 in 1861. Variety of calibers. Cartridges. That's interesting. Watch it real. Yeah. Slant breach. That's the one that we had.
Okay, so what the hell is error? Basically, it's a water bottle.
I'm tired.
It's like science.
Get some coffee. That's definitely not the one.
Okay, with a very interesting Civil War era rifle here. This is a Flame Breech Charts, the model 1862. These were a very early breech-loading rifle that was still using brass powder. Did not use brass cartridges. Now, a lot of these were adapted to brass cartridges after the Civil War, once brass cartridges were readily available. This gun would actually use a paper cartridge, where you'd have a round lead projectile, or a minier ball, and roll it up in a tube of paper, pour powder into the paper, and then seal off the back of the paper, so that you weren't trying to actually dump loose powder into the breech of the gun. You just stuffed in the paper cartridge, put a cap on the nipple here, away you go. This is a full-length rifle version of the Sharps. These are relatively uncommon. Most of the Sharps that were made and used in the Civil War were actually carbines with significantly shorter barrels. This is a full-on 36-inch barrel, believe it or not. And the action on the Sharps is kind of like a lever action. Pull the lever down, the breech block drops down. So we got our breech block here. There's where you put the percussion cap hammer. When I pull the lever, the whole breech block slides down in its little track there. That allows you to load a cartridge in. Load a cartridge in right there. Bring up the breech block, and that seals it. Now, one of the problems with these early Sharps rifles is that they weren't perfectly gas sealed. We did a little bit of shooting on slow motion, and we'll show that to you in just a sec. You can actually see gas venting out the bottom of the action, where all you have here is a metal-to-metal contact, and it's got to be loose enough that you can actually slide the breech up and down. What these originally used, and this was an imperfect system, and this example rifle shows you why it's imperfect. There is a sleeve in the back of the chamber here that actually is supposed to slide back and forth a little bit. And the idea was, under pressure of firing, that sleeve would be pushed back against the breech block, and that would seal the action. So you're firing black powder with this sliding sleeve, and it takes about one round for black powder to foul the interface between the sleeve and the barrel, and then this sliding sleeve gets jammed in place and it doesn't slide anymore. This one, for example, is pretty well thoroughly jammed in place. And from both reenactor accounts and original accounts, once it's frozen up like that, it's basically hopeless. You take what you got at that point. You'll have some gas leak and you just deal with it. Later models of the Sharps came up with some better ways to solve this problem. Primarily, they actually started putting a platinum alloy ring on the breech face itself, and that ring, under firing, would obturate, almost like brass, and seal gases inside the chamber. But this is an earlier version. You can see it's got the slant instead of a straight breech action. That's kind of indicative of the early guns. And this one doesn't have any of those gas seal features. What it does have, these early Sharps had a pellet primer system that it was kind of clever, but it didn't work out all that effectively in the field. The idea was you actually had a magazine of primers, 25 of them, in this little spring-loaded tube right here. Now, this system isn't quite functional, but we can show you how it would have worked. These aren't primers really in the conventional sense. They're a kind of a frisbee-shaped disc of mercury fulminate, or priming compound. there's an arm that sticks out of the side of this primer mechanism, and it interfaces with a slot in the hammer here. When the hammer goes forward, it pulls this little arm with it, which pushes this little block to the front here, and it actually throws one of these primer pellets out the front. This slot is where a primer pellet would come flying out, literally uncontrolled, and it's doing this as the hammer is falling. And it was actually timed such that the hammer would catch the pellet and slam it into the nipple and fire the gun. At least that was the idea. That idea didn't work perfectly. It was reasonable. It did work sometimes. And from looking at the original source material from Confederate or Civil War veterans, it seems that they found it to be an advantage to use in situations like very cold weather, where the soldiers' fingers would get cramped up and stiff and hard to, not very dexterous. And it was then, you're better off relying on maybe this 80% reliable pellet primer system, and maybe you'd have to refire a couple times if the primers didn't work. But that was still quicker and easier than manually capping the gun for each shot if your fingers are stiff and you just can't get the caps in reliably. This is a paper cartridge. It's leaked a bit of powder, which is now stuck to the lubrication on the bullet, but you get the basic idea. Piece of paper, folded over at the end. What I do to load this is I'm going to stuff it into the breech here, and I push it in until the bullet seats on the lands and grooves, so it stops. You can see we have paper sticking out. That's a good thing, because when I close the breech block, it's going to act as a shear, and it's going to cut the back of the cartridge off, which is going to mean that there's an open pile of powder right in front of the flash hole, so that the cartridge will ignite. So there's our loose paper. You can see there was plenty of powder in that charge. We got some falling out. That tells me there's plenty of powder right up against the flash hole. We will get a few grains of that igniting when I fire the gun as well. Now, I have the hammer at half cock. We're going to add a percussion cap. These little guys. This batch of caps is a little bit unreliable, so we may have to try this a couple times. But we seat that on there nice and firmly. I put on my eyes. Bring the hammer back to full cock, and we're ready to fire. And if you want absolute proof of the gas leakage, there it is. It blew right down on my wrist, because I wasn't thinking about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and tune back into Forgotten Weapons for more early breech loaders.
If you live in Westchester County or upstate New York, you need to hear about this new inflation relief program. The federal government has officially extended the solar investment credit, which gives homeowners thousands of dollars when they upgrade their homes with solar.
Welcome to another episode of In Range. I have in my hands a beautiful Pedersoli 1859 Sharps 54 caliber paper cartridges musket cap ignition. Sometimes these were referred to as Beecher's Bibles. Just before the Civil War, a whole bunch of these were shipped in crates labeled Bibles to not draw attention for the abolitionists that were going to start an uprising with the slaves against slavery. The idea was that the Bible had something to argue against in regards to slavery, but the Sharps rifle would be the ultimate solution to slavery in the United States. Now, we all know where that landed up, turned into the Civil War. That said, this isn't about that. What's happening here is remote brutality. So just this last weekend, there was supposed to be Finnish brutality, the Winter War edition, in Finland. COVID restrictions prevented the ability of the match to be run. On top of that, I wasn't able to attend because I didn't feel comfortable with doing international travel without able to being required by a vaccine, and I have not gotten mine yet. So I stood down, but a small handful of people made it there. Ian, one of them. He already has a video up about this with the What Would Sonar Do carbine. And so what happened was we decided to make a call out to the audience. You out there, the viewer, get out there and get some shooting in if you can, because, man, we're not getting enough of that in right now, are we? And what we have here is a modified version of the Casarda drill. Casarda drill, if you haven't seen it before on in-range or at the brutality matches, is something I actually designed but did not name it for myself. Someone else put my name on it, but it is my stage design. The idea behind it was you would throw a kettlebell downrange. Where it landed would be a next prone position to get a hit on the target or something like that. Turns out it was a very difficult stage that really balanced everything we'd want in a two-gun stage. It balanced strength, cardio, and marksmanship all in one thing. So the version that was designed for Finnish brutality, the Winter War, was different, and we're now calling it the Casarda Drill Universal. And the idea behind this is that, for the most part, many of you out there can set up this stage and run it yourself, and that's what we're calling for you to do. And it's the reason I'm using an 1859 Sharps. So Ian did his run with a What Would Sonar Do carbine, but I'm doing with this because the idea behind this isn't necessarily to have the best score, although a score is a great thing. The idea behind this is to take any gun you want out there in the field, if you can set it up, and to shoot this stage, and then post your run to Instagram, Facebook, etc., and tag with the tags below in this video. And there'll be essentially a raffle run, not based on score, but just your participation by Vars Aleka, and they will ultimately pick someone to get some free swag, which is pretty cool. Even if you don't get the free swag, just go out and do it. It's a fun drill. It's really good. It's good to get outside and to fire your guns. So here's how this works. You have a target downrange at about 50 yards or 50 meters. It could be as large as a full-size IDPA or IPSC steel target, or smaller. Up to you if you want to make it harder. You have a kettlebell of 45 pounds or 20 kilograms. So it could be a rock that weighs 45 pounds, but you know, a kettlebell is the best solution. You start on one end of the bay, and there's 15 yards between two fault lines. Fault line on the left, fault line on the right. At the buzzer, go prone, get one hit on the steel target. Once you get that hit, leave your rifle on the ground, stand up, pick up the weight, probably a kettlebell, and throw it towards the other fault line. Underhand by you. You must throw underhand for safety reasons. Throw it underhand towards the other position. Once where the kettlebell falls, you go to the kettlebell, go prone, get one hit on the target. Stand up, throw the kettlebell. Once the kettlebell passes the other fault line and you get a hit, you get one bonus. Here's the thing. You do this for a full 180 seconds, 3 minutes. The idea behind this is you don't stop. You just keep going for 3 minutes. Doesn't sound like much. I'm going to tell you, even after the first minute, this is a brutal exercise, not only on you as an individual, your gear, your marksmanship, your cardio, and your strength. So to prove to you out in the audience that you should just use whatever you want and get out there and do it, here we are with a paper cartridge 1859 Sharps. So here's the breech end of the Sharps rifle. Here's how this works. Cock the hammer, drop the breech block. At that point, you can see into the chamber. Now, as I said, I created these cartridges. All these are handmade. These bullets are actually molded by me, looped by me. These tubes are created by me. And that little rear there is actually coffee filter. None of this is nitrided. You don't actually need it to be. As long as you use a coffee filter for the rear, you should get decent ignition. But as you'll see when I drop this into the breech, it's exactly flush so that it doesn't cut when I close it. Not very much, a little tiny bit. That's not a problem. At that point, you have a consistent powder charge. Here's what the Berdan sharpshooters did for accuracy. It also makes it easier to load, in my opinion. At that point, you dig into your pouch, get a musket cap, put it onto the cone, and you're ready to shoot. Once you fired, pull the fired musket cap off, open the breech, and then you're ready to chamber another paper cartridge. So obviously this smock is not period correct to the Civil War, nor is the hat. The sling is, though, and all the accessories I'm using to shoot the rifle are. This is where my musket caps are. Pretty ingenious design. There's a little leather flap, and then there's cotton here that keeps the musket caps from falling out under, movement. Those are your primers. And then this holds 20 paper cartridges, which should be more than enough for 3 minutes of this torture. So the match director out here decided to make this a little harder on us today, and instead of using a full-size IDPA or IPSC steel target, he went hard mode and put a mini IPSC, a little tiny. Now, granted, it's only at 50 meters, but it was a much smaller target. In fact, it's about 1/3 the size of a full-size IPSC or IDPA target. Are you ready? Stand by. the target over. Get lower. Get lower.
Where were your sights?
6 o'clock. Come down. I target under 6 o'clock. This was good. Straight on the first row is always the best. Yeah, well, there's a reason for that.
I was saying it'd be interesting to keep track of metrics of time to first bonus, time to second bonus, see how much it spreads out.
It's ridiculous.
If you don't know what a Sharps rifle is, it was a rifle designed in 1848 by Christian Sharps. The falling block action has a lever, you pull it back, you load a single cartridge in, you close the lever, you pull back on the hammer, and then you go fire it, and it goes bang. Not only did they make Sharps rifles, but they also made Sharps carbines, and these
The weapon that the sharpshooters used was
So at the breakout of the American Civil War, there were two major carbines used in the U.S. cavalry in the beginning of that war, the Hall carbine and the Sharps carbine. To give you an idea of how much the Sharps outnumber the Hall, the first ordnance returns that we have from 1862 show that the Sharps carbine outnumbered and outpaced the next number 2 Hall carbine 6-1. This week on the 11th OVC, the most popular arm of the U.S. cavalry, the Sharps carbine. Like we previously said, the Sharps carbine was by far the most popular carbine used by cavalry throughout the entire war. In 1862, we had the first run of the ordnance returns that we can look at from the National Archive. There were about 12,000 Sharps carbines used in the field, issued to units in the mid to late 1862. Compare that to the second most popular carbine at the time, which was a Hall carbine, which only had about 1,900, let's round it up to 2,000 carbines in the field. So again, in 1862, there were 12,000 Sharps used by cavalry. Compare that to the number 2, which is the Hall carbine, and they only had 2,000 carbines, 2,000 Hall carbines issued at that point in the war. The Sharps carbine started on top and stayed on top. Then in 1863, as all the carbines started to pick up in popularity, the Sharps carbine jumped up to 20,608 carbines to that of the number 2 Burnside. The Burnside definitely outpaced the Hall, but in 1863 again, the Sharps had 20,000, and the next most popular carbine, the Burnside, only had 8,000. In 1864, there were 22,900 Sharps. Let's round that to 23,000 Sharps in the field. Compare that to 15,000 Burnsides at the same time. At the end of the war in 1865, there were 27,000 Sharps carbines used by the Federal cavalry in the American Civil War at the end of it. Compare that to the number 2 most popular carbine issued at that time, which was 24,000 Spencers. That means at the beginning of the war, the Sharps outnumbered any other carbine 6-1. In 1863, the Sharps outnumbered any other carbine 2.5 times to 1. In 1864, it numbered 1.5 times.
In 1865, with the Spencer catching up, it was still more than any other carbine out there. Common on the Model 1851 box lock carbine, which featured the Maynard tape primer system, and the Model 1852 and the Model 1853 slant breech carbines, which were both equipped with Sharp's patent pellet primer system as an integral part of its breech mechanism. The Model 1853 carbines were nicknamed Breacher's Bibles after the noted New York clergyman and abolitionist Henry Ward Beecher. Approximately 900 of these were shipped in heavy crates marked Bibles for use by anti-slavery free soil settlers who were fighting against pro-slavery forces in Bleeding, Kansas during the 1850s. One of the most famous free soilers was John Brown, of course, who later used 300 Model 1853 Sharps carbines in his ill-fated attempt to capture the U.S. Army at Harper's Ferry. Christian Sharps, the inventor of the original Sharps carbine, served as a technical advisor to the Sharps Rifle Manufacturing Company, receiving royalties on the manufacture of their firearms. His relationship with the company was a rocky one. In 1853, Sharps severed all connections, as far as we can tell, with the firm, and there's no evidence that he ever had any further association with the company that continued to bear his name. In 1855, the Sharps carbine introduced the Model 1855 Sharps carbine. While these carbines were in production, both Robbins and Lawrence and Sharps suffered serious financial losses. The latter corporation went bankrupt and their operations were taken over by Sharps and moved to Hartford, Connecticut. The Sharps new Model 1859 that you see so commonly in the early part of the war was introduced in that year, obviously, and was available as a carbine and in a round barrel military rifle or an octagonal barrel sport rifle version. Its straight breech design is credited to Richard Lawrence, formerly of Robbins and Lawrence, who had become the superintendent of the Sharps Rifle Company. This design, in conjunction with a breech block mounted plate capable of slight rearward movement when under pressure, created a moderately effective gas seal. And anyone who shot a Sharps carbine, you definitely realize that there's some leaks in the breech of the Sharps carbine. The new Model 1859 also employed an improved version of the Sharps pellet primer system, which allowed the pellet feed mechanism to be disengaged, which this actually then allowed ordinary percussion caps to be used. Like earlier Sharps designs, the Model 1859 fired a glazed linen combustible 52 caliber cartridge, and when closed, the breech block sheared off the rear of the cartridge, exposing the propellant of the gunpowder. So during the American Civil War, the federal government bought over 80,000 Sharps carbines and nearly 10,000 Sharps rifles. These arms were highly regarded by troops who used them. Sharps carbines found favor with federal cavalry troopers. Even the Confederate government recognized the superiority of the new Model 1859 carbine, contracting with a Richmond firm for the production of 5,000 copies of the Sharps carbine. The new Model 1859 was followed by the new Model 1863 and, of course, the 1865 variant as well. These were nearly identical to the 1859s, differing primarily in the barrel stamping and the omission of the buttstock patch boxes. One of the things I always like about the breech-loading carbines, and of course they did back then, was the idea that you could load and fire that carbine significantly quicker than you can, say, the standard musket, whether the Springfield, Enfield, or smoothbores, whatever. From your standard 3 shots a minute on the infantryman, a good soldier could fire 8 to 10-ish shots a minute with the Sharps carbine. Now, personally, I'm not up to 8 to 10 well-aimed shots, but if you're hurrying and you just want to just shoot some lead, you can definitely get that 8 mark relatively quickly with the Sharps carbine. So going back to the start of the Civil War, on December 18th, 1861, there was a shortage, obviously, with the growth of the Army, of breech-loading carbines that the government could issue to cavalry units. So on that day of December 18th, 1861, the entirety of the Washington arsenal only had the following carbines in stock to issue to cavalry troops. They only had 2 Burnsides, 1 Joslin carbine, 92 Gallaghers, 6 Symes, 6 Schroeders, 157 Sharps, and 36 smoothbore musketoons. So hundreds of reports regarding the Sharps carbine were received throughout the war, of course, because they were such a popular arm. The vast majority of these reports were listing it as a very good and durable arm in cavalry service. The following are examples of the 1864 responses from the field. In January of 1864, Lieutenant Colonel Wallace from the 4th Illinois Cavalry rated the Sharps carbine as the best arm that he has ever observed in the field. These same comments were received from Major Seeley of the 5th Illinois, Colonel Stevens of the 2nd Wisconsin, Colonel Hovick of the 7th Kansas, Lieutenant Colonel Caldwell with the 1st Iowa, Major Walsh with the 3rd Tennessee, and Captain Preston with the 2nd Missouri. Major Thompson with the 1st Iowa stated the Sharps carbine has no superior and no equal. In range, it is fully equal to the mini rifle, which is interesting, and the facility and the accuracy which it is loaded and discharged renders our dismounted cavalry troopers more than equal to the enemy's infantry and far superior to their cavalry. One area of concern was raised by Major Patton of the 3rd Indiana Cavalry. The problem is the small spring and the lock were easily broken, but the armor, if the springs were available, could easily fix these in the field. At the time that Major Patton made this comment in 1864, his regiment had 247 Sharps in his unit at the time. So enough of the history. Actually, let's get to the operation of the actual Sharps carbine. When using this arm, it is important to know the operation, the capabilities, and limitations of the arm you're actually using in the field. As you can see here, you must make sure that the block cleanly shears off the back of the cartridge. If it folds the paper or the linen cartridge, then there's a chance that the flash channel or the spark will not be able to ignite the powder and then, of course, discharge your fire. Additionally, be sure to blow off the excess powder from the top of the block, or else there's a chance it could flash in your face. And as we all know, no one wants flashing in your face. Unless you're weird, then you like fire in your face. So, anyway. So while we could spend an entire year just talking about the Sharps carbine, I hope this little video was useful for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Those of you who are out there and you're trying to pick which carbine to get for reenacting if you do cavalry, as we've said in previous videos, the Sharps carbine is by far head and shoulders above any other carbine out there. If you're a historian or collector, obviously there's a lot of Sharps carbines out there. Fun to collect, fun to get. Check the serial number, see which unit they were issued to. But until next time, please like us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please notify us by clicking the bell in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, because apparently with YouTube, subscriptions don't do anything, and you still
Some interesting that Sharp was a student.
So please do that. We enjoy you guys watching our videos. Please.
Of the other guy whose rifle was second to the Sharps. I forgot the name of it already. Cartridge. I don't know anything about Burnside. I'm not sure what that is. Let's see over here. Burnside rifle.
This is the 5th model Burnside carbine from the American Civil War, manufactured sometime around 1863-64.
This is my 1864 Burnside carbine. It was the first U.S. Army firearm, Civil War era, to use metallic cartridge ammunition. It fires these interesting conical-shaped 54 caliber cartridges. They're designed to help seal the breech block against the barrel. When you pull the lever, it pivots the block and inserts the nose of the bullet into the barrel. They still take a separate musket cap to ignite the powder. These cases do not have their own integral primer. I start by punching out 54 caliber shot cards to separate the powder from the black powder lubricant. I make this traditional lubricant from beeswax and lamb tallow. I pour the melted lubricant over the bullets to fill their grease grooves. I then pour a layer of lubricant, and when it sets, I punch out grease cookies to place on top of the shot cards. This is going to help keep the foulings on. I fill each case with a black powder charge. Then I place a shot card on top of the powder. I add the grease cookie. And then I hand press each bullet into the case. Once they're in there, I give each one of the melted lubricant.
Good that it was.
Oh, it's a little stiffer.
All right, good?
Yeah, there's...
And phone's coming back on. Maybe I can get some more.
Cool, good.
Yep. It was way sub-6.
This thing's fun.
Yeah.
Side rifle. It's kind of boring.
Even though it's percussion, the percussion or it is breech loading carbine that takes itself into a metallic cartridge. Now, at the time this was happening, there was only one other gun that was doing that, was the Henry. And the Henry's got a great deal of positive press. This, the Burnside cartridge, named after its inventor, Ambrose Burnside, doesn't garner that kind of same, kind of first in the field type of press. It's a very unique cartridge. I wish I had one here to show you, but it looks like a miniature, torch. It's got a tapered brass casing to it, which has a little pinhole in the base. Now, you would think that having an open hole would make the cartridge susceptible to going off in your pocket or your cartridge box, or absorbing moisture and things like that. But this hole was big enough not to have the powder fall out of it, but just large enough to allow the flame from the cap to ignite.
So poor Ambrose Burnside cannot catch a break. Before his blunder at Fredericksburg, he invented one of the most popular carbines of the Civil War, but sold his patent before the war and did not receive any money from the more than 55,000 Burnside carbines sold during the American Civil War. This week on the 11th OVC, the Burnside carbine. So the more than 400,000 carbines purchased by the Union Army during the war, none was more colorful, if you will, and none better built than the Burnside carbine. 55,567 Burnsides were purchased by the U.S. government over the course of the Civil War. Designed by the famous Ambrose Burnside, it imitates the breech block design of the Cosmopolitan and has other similar features that he obviously stole from the outdated Hall carbine. But the one thing that sets apart the Burnside carbine from almost all the other early war carbines is that it used an enclosed brass cartridge with a flash hole to allow the initiating device to go through that flash hole, similar to the Smith carbine that we talked about before. This brass cartridge also solved the common problem from breech-loading carbines at the time, which was how to seal the breech when it was discharged. The bulge of the brass cartridge served as this seal. When the cartridge was fired, the brass would bulge and would expand inside the chamber like modern cartridges used today. This innovation allowed the Burnside carbine to be one of the most popular carbines of the war because it was able to seal that breech better than a lot of other carbines out there. When the war broke out, the shortage to supply new cavalry regiments was so dire that the entire Washington arsenal reported only the following carbines in its stores. One Joslin, yes, one Joslin, 92 Gallaghers, 6 Symes, 6 Schroeder carbines, 157 Sharps, again, the king of all carbines, right? 36 Musketoons, and 2 Burnsides. From this point, the Burnside would grow to be the second most popular carbine used for the first 3 years of the war, only outpaced by the Sharps and then later the Spencer carbine. By the fall of 1863, nearly 8,000 Burnsides were in field service, most of which were the 4th model. At Buford's famous fight at McPherson's Ridge in Gettysburg, Gamble's and Devon's men held 86 Burnside carbines out of 1,739 carbines used in that specific fight. So this ended up being about 5% of the total number, outnumbered, of course, by the Sharps, the Smith, the Gallagher, and the Merrill, at McPherson's Ridge in Gettysburg. However, during East Cavalry Field on July 3rd, out of the 3,174 carbines used by federal troops, 673, which ends up being about 21% of all the carbines used by federal troopers at East Cavalry Field, carried Burnsides, second only to the dominant Sharps carbine. So on McPherson's Ridge, Burnside carbine, not so much the commonality. However, East Cavalry Field, during that fight, the Sharps, of course, was dominant across the war, as we've talked about a lot, but the second most common carbine used at East Cavalry Field was the Burnside carbine. So the feedback from troopers on the Burnside carbine, like any other arm, spanned from hatred to the best arm in the military service at the time. Lieutenant Colonel Stedman of the 6th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry, with 179 Burnsides, stated that they were vastly inferior to the Sharps and felt they should be condemned. Again, that was from the 6th Ohio. In September of 1863, Major Bradley of the 7th Kentucky, which had 215 Burnsides at the time, stated he felt they were always getting out of order. Interesting to note. So Colonel Sykes of the 7th Tennessee, which had 136 carbines, also reported more specifically that he felt the metal used to manufacture the carbines were made with an inferior metal. But with those negative comments, we have Lieutenant Colonel Ruggles of the 3rd Illinois Cavalry with 114 Burnsides in his possession at the time, that stated in November of 1863 that his men enjoyed their Burnside carbines. He went on to say that they were light to carry, shot well, and the cartridges were well protected by the elements. So now let's talk specifically about how to fire this weapon. The operation of this carbine is quite nice, actually, and smooth. The lever at the bottom of the trigger guard unlatches, and the breech block allows it to pivot and rotate, providing a clear access to slip the brass cartridge inside the breech block. Once loaded, the block is then rotated back into place, and after the cap is placed on the nipple, it's ready to discharge. So my personal experience with the Burnside carbine, shooting at live fire for the first time, was actually for this episode and filming the live fire sequence that you'll see here in a little bit. One of the things I noticed and actually enjoyed is that the Burnside carbine is by far the most accurate original firearm that I've shot. More so than the Springfields, more so than some of the older trapdoor 4570s that I've shot. I love the Burnside more so than the Sharps carbine. I don't know, again, maybe it's my load or whatever, but the Burnside carbine with the brass cartridge does seal the breech block significantly better than almost any other carbine out there. The Smith, I have blowback in my face. The Sharps have blowback in my face. The Spencer is kind of in a family by itself. But one thing I do is the Burnside carbine is the most accurate shot, at least out of the originals that I've fired. And I would say this, considering I've only shot it maybe 20 times so far now, is my favorite original carbine for live fire. And it is true, it is one of the lighter ones out there, probably only second to the Smith carbine that I've held out there. It's really, really good, easy to handle, and of course being the 4th model, easy to not jam. Now the differences I learned about the 1st model, the 2nd model, the 3rd model, and the 4th model, and then ending on the 5th model, is something that we'll have to do another episode on. There's a lot of really cool details. It's definitely one of my favorite carbines. As far as speed of fire, you could definitely fire this as quick, if not quicker, than the Smith carbine and the Sharps carbine. It's very, very quick to load, especially with brass cartridges. Pretty easy and forgiving under certain conditions. In short, the Burnside carbine, as of late, has taken kind of a back seat to the more common Sharps carbine, and of course later on the Spencer carbine. It started the war among